Allison Jayne Ewing. I really love talking to Allison. What a pleasure. Her book, Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. She found herself divorced. She had to start dating, finding, another friend, another mate, another relationship. And she wrote this book. She also does EFT. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's a tapping technique that really finds triggers, finds realizations in your system. But fascinating discussion about dating, about finding partnership, about finding love. She is a woman, and so she speaks from the woman's perspective. And I bring up the issue of everything you're saying about what women should do, what should they should look for. I don't find that different from men's perspective as well. I wonder what you'll think when you hear the conversation. We open up with the Cinderella effect, and I point blank, she talks about it in her book. But I asked her how the story of Cinderella, fucked her up. And it's a great response. I don't know if you've thought about it at this kind of level, but it's a great discussion with Allison. We go on for quite a while. And it's fun talking to somebody who's been down a similar road than yourself, and it's a great conversation, and I really, really enjoyed it. It went by very quickly. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Thank you so much for your time today, Allison Jayne Ewing. It's such a pleasure. How could possibly poor Cinderella fuck you up?
Well, this is one of my favorite chapters that I wrote in the book. And it's basically a reflection that I experienced when I was dating again post divorce, where I realized that the whole idea behind Cinderella is this notion that all these women were competing to try to get the attention of Prince Charming, right? And the stepsisters are like knocking each other out of the way, and so it sets up this idea in women's mind, two ideas really that I think are very toxic. One is that there's a limited pool of available men, and that we in fact have to compete with other women over them, right? Which is just not true, but it sets up this very toxic dynamic among women. And then two, that it is our job to be chosen by a man. That we're supposed to show up on dates, being cute enough and smart enough and funny enough and all the things. So in hopes that he will choose us. And I realized at some point that I was dating from that perspective. And I was even just starting online chats from that perspective, trying to win someone over. And some of the times I wasn't even so sure I was all that interested in the guy myself, but it was just sort of this expectation that that's what you do in dating. You go out there and you try to get chosen. And then once you're chosen, then maybe you can start to think about, oh, is this the right guy for me? And I realized it was so opposite of, let's say, how I would approach a job interview. Obviously, you go into a job interview, you do want them to choose you, but you go in discerning and you go in looking around and seeing what's the culture here. Is this really where I would want to work? Would I feel comfortable with these people? I mean, it's much more of a two-way street. And I did that all the time with job interviews. So why wasn't I doing that dating? Well, I think part of it is some of these early childhood messages that I received that got deeply embedded about what it is to be a woman dating is to be chosen.
Why is dating so different between men and women? Men view it one way, when women view it another. Is it partly what you're talking about now?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think there are also similarities. I think that's there, men also can feel like sort of a good match woman is a scarce resource at the same time in
Mm,
midlife. But I think that there is much more of sort of fear-based messaging sent to women
mm,
than men around this issue. And I think it's also, there's the societal norm that it's okay for a man to date a much younger woman, but it's stigmatized and taboo for a woman to date a much younger man. So that right there does actually just statistically change the numbers a
mm,
little bit. And then also, I know with the clients I work with, I hear this a lot that they feel like, well, a man my age could date someone much younger than me. So why would he want me? Why would he want me with my old body or my wrinkly skin? Or I hear all these things from my clients
mm, mm.
when he could date someone, 20 years younger or something like that. So, but again, that's just a fear based thought. I mean, if you're in midlife and you're looking for a guy who's a similar age guy to you, then you wouldn't want to attract the guy who would be interested in someone 20 years younger anyway. That's not your right fit guy.
I always said that, you know, a man isn't a man. I would say something controversial. It's my opinion. I'm going to say it, damn it. A man isn't a man until at least 50, maybe 45. A woman, you can go a little bit, women mature a little bit earlier than men. Again, these are sweeping generalizations. And a man, I'm 55 years old, that wants somebody that's not, well, I'll call just a mature woman, whatever you want to place it, is, like you said, uh, why would that person be desirable?
Right. Right. Exactly. If he's looking for, you know, someone that much younger, maybe there's some issues there around wanting to reclaim
Yeah.
his youth or something like that that just probably wouldn't be a good fit for you if you're a woman in your 50s looking to date.
You mentioned before that taboo of the men dating younger women, but hasn't the kind of cougar movement happened here where there's certain women dating younger men, only younger men?
Yes, yes, absolutely. But just think about what you just said, the cougar movement. It is
Mm,
labeled and it is a little bit of a negative
is it?
label. It's not
Ah,
where I don't think that men have the same, there's no word for a man who dates younger women. There's no
huh.
term for it. So why is there a term for it? And then think about the
Oh,
cougar. What is that saying? It's like, oh, she's like sticking her claws in this younger man.
uh,
And it's just, there's sort of
predatory.
yeah, a predatory kind of connotation to the word cougar that, personally I feel really offended by, and I
Ah,
don't care for that at all. And I think it's almost silly if a woman wants to date someone, if they get along and, they're, I don't know, 8 years apart or something like that, that's not really considered a big deal at all in the reverse. But it's for some reason, it's like, oh, look at you. Oh, you got a younger man. Oh, you're robbing the cradle. Oh, you're a cougar.
right,
There's
right,
all
right.
these labels put to it that just
Wow.
wouldn't happen if it was a 50-year-old man, let's say, dating a 42-year-old woman. Like nobody would think twice
Ah.
about
So there has to be a term. This is completely unfair, which many things are, but there should be a term for an older man that only wants to date younger women like that, and the cougar equivalent. That's very interesting.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yet another double standard.
Yes, unfortunately, there's quite a few of those out there.
You say that you want women to find love before they get their shit together.
Not necessarily that I want them to, but that more that do we ever all have our shit together? I mean,
Mm.
is there a point in life's journey where you've got it all together? Where so I feel like another sort of damaging societal message that gets relayed to women, especially women dating at midlife, is that, oh, you have to love yourself completely. You have to be fully healed, whatever that means,
Mm.
and before you can find love. And it's a paradoxical notion that I think is sort of unhelpful in that it makes women think that A, they're broken or they're damaged or there's something wrong with them, and B, that they have to figure it all out before they can even begin to date or be involved in a relationship.
Hmm.
And I personally believe some of our deepest healing happens in our most intimate relationship. And your partner, your romantic partner, is a perfect mirror to bring up all the things in your psyche that maybe do need healing. All those childhood wounds get really activated with the person that we're most intimate with. So the idea or the notion that you're supposed to heal all of that and then meet your guy, I just think it's a little ludicrous. I mean, you think about all the people that meet in their 20s and are still happily married. Well, do you think they all had their act together completely and they were in full self-actualization before they met their guy? No, they were not. It's not that. Now, I do believe that the more personal work you do and the more introspective healing that you do, the healthier of a partner you will attract in.
Mm.
So I think there's a benefit, a very large benefit to working on yourself. It just doesn't necessarily have to preclude, that you cannot be in a relationship in the meantime or that you cannot date in the meantime.
And plus, we're all a work in progress, I feel. So there's kind of these hard stops or these deal breakers that we think we have in our mind that, and some of them may be very, like, so an ex addict, right? Can't have any alcohol. So I don't think, that person could date somebody who drinks or, that might be something, but it might be something trivial as, well, you're Chicago, like somebody, a Cubs fan. Boy, I can never, be with a Cubs fan or something is just, I'll say as trivial as that. I know that's serious for you, but so for where I'm from, be a Red Sox fan. But my point is that you have like these hard kind of deal breakers, you think, but then when you meet and you grow with that person, things start to loosen up. Actually, that's not that bad. That's not as much of a deal breaker as I thought.
Yes, yes. When I have clients who I see things like that, I almost call them the Seinfeld things.
Ah,
Seinfeld in the show, he would always find these like very sort of minutia things to break up
yes.
the woman over, right? It was like, oh, she's got big hands or something like
The way she laughs.
that. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So the Seinfeld syndrome to me is
Ah.
indicative of someone who is actually just fearing intimacy for whatever reason
Ah.
and who is really blocking that themselves from becoming intimately involved. So they kind of cling on to these little, sort of insignificant things. The things that are significant and important that you should be looking for when you're dating are characterological things, values. Do you have an alignment in terms of values with the person? And are those values true to their actual character? So not how they are with you, because anybody can be anything with you, especially in the first few months, but how they are with the busboy at the restaurant, the Uber driver when you go somewhere. What is their character in the world outside of your relationship? And is that in alignment with your character and what's most important to you, the values that are most important to you?
It's really an interesting point, and it's also syndrome, Allison. And I know more single women than I do men. I'm not quite sure why, but I every once in a while when I hear the women talk and complain, I almost get the feeling that they actually kind of enjoy it a little bit because they go on these dates and the things they tell me is like, oh, he ordered before I did. I'm like, well, you know, I don't. I'm not here to defend manhood, but perhaps that's just it. How about else? Was he a gentleman? Did he hold the door? Was he a gentleman? Well, yeah, but I don't know if I can get over that. So I guess this is more Seinfeld syndrome, but is there such a thing where like maybe the women kind of like to complain and be single for a while together? Because ironically, once they get somebody and it happens and they're long, they kind of separate from that group because
Yeah.
they're with that person now. So
Mhm.
there's like a pack mentality. I don't, something I have a back theory of that I never quite voiced.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a thing because I think you have to consider why some people would maybe want to stay single
Mm,
subconsciously. Of course, consciously they express they want to be in a relationship and they feel they want to be in a relationship. But what's going on subconsciously? Were they in a previous bad relationship or marriage where they really felt like they lost themselves in that? Like they gave up their boundaries, they became too enmeshed,
mm,
they their needs got so on the back burner compared to their partners. Well, that woman might be afraid of getting into another relationship because she doesn't trust
mm,
herself to keep her
mm.
boundaries and to stay true to herself and not get lost in yet another man. That's a pretty decent subconscious reason for not wanting to be in a
Yeah.
relationship. And it requires a lot of work on your subconscious underlying patterns to clear that up. And I know we'll get into this is where I use the EFT tapping
Yes.
to do that work. But one of the things you just said there reminded me of a story of a tapping I did myself with the mentor that I work with, who is my EFT practitioner. And we were tapping on sort of what you're saying about this um, pack mentality, right? Or this loyalty, this intense
Mm,
loyalty and alignment I had with my fellow single friends that at some point I recognized, whoa, this might actually be getting in the way of me being in a relationship because I noticed that I was very triggered if one of my friends would get in a relationship and kind of disappear and ghost us. That was very triggering to me. And I've done enough work on myself at this point that when something triggers me and it seems a little disproportionate to the situation, let's say, it's always a clue. It's always oh, that's something I need to tap on. And when I tapped on that reaction, a very, very, I call it little t trauma memory from my childhood came up. So one of the great things about EFT tapping is it kind of brings insights, and when you clear out some of the emotional gunk in your brain, you things can drop in, wisdom can drop in, and so I had this memory drop in of when I was a little kid. I was probably about 5, and we were hiking through the woods in northern New Jersey where I lived to go see the big rock in our neighborhood. It was a thing, and everybody's neighborhood had a big rock, and we were going. And the oldest boy in the neighborhood, Jimmy DeSato, was taking me and my sister and a bunch of us, and we hit a mud patch. And now I was a really girly girl, and I was not going to walk through the mud in my jelly shoes. So, so I sort of froze, and Jimmy offered to piggyback me over
wow.
the mud. And when he did, and I would never have remembered this if I wasn't tapping on this event with my practitioner. When he lifted me up and put me on his back, I looked at my sister and she gave me a very subtle yet very angry look
Hmm.
because she was 2 years older. She was too big to be piggybacked. I'm sure she would have liked to have been piggybacked. And she was mad at me because this man, this boy, was giving me special attention and treatment. And so what I realized is I made a little subconscious vow in that moment to never hurt my sister again by choosing a man over her, which then in my brain sort of generalized and extended to all sisters, all women. And
Hmm.
so I had this intense loyalty to women over men, which resulted in me being single for a long time.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Fascinating. I've been the guy who, started dating somebody in one of these circles and then entered, a lot of single women. And it can be a bit, daunting. And what I would offer, and I think it's the only power I had, is always my opinion, and I shared it as such. But if we did go out and they saw somebody interested in somebody, I would be a great way. I could walk up to any guy and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so I offer my services. That sounds a bit it's a bit gigolo-ish.
Classic wingman move, right?
A
No, that's
wingman.
yeah.
Exactly right. I could offer those things, but it's fascinating to me. And so it's fascinating to me how you can kind of defend yourself and you could find those things out. And getting back to that point, finding love before, you get with somebody, there's a certain amount of after a divorce. Divorce is traumatic, and there's a certain amount of healing that needs to be done, but kind of getting back to loving yourself before you can love somebody else. Is there also truth to that in dating?
Yes, I think there is truth to it. I just think it's tricky. It's a
Ah.
tricky phrase because I can tell you that I reached a point where I thought to myself, if one more person tells me to love myself before I find love, I'm going to punch them in the face.
Ah.
I mean, it is like you are inundated with it now.
Mm.
Especially if you have any of that trending on your social media, then the algorithm is
Mm.
doing more and more and more, right? And so I was like, I think I love myself. I don't know. I mean, I like myself a whole lot. Like, what
Mm.
am I doing wrong? And so I I do caution. Well, it is true. Of course, it's true. The more you love yourself, the more love you're going to draw to you, and that's just a universal truth because that's just sort of law of attraction, self fulfilling prophecy. Like, the energetic and emotional vibe you are in attracts like. So it will attract people
Mm.
of that same vibe. However, I also know that I've worked with a lot of clients who've said, like, I love myself. I'm pretty sure I do. And I
Mm.
still can't find love. So I think that message in a way has gone a little too far. The pendulum swung a little too far,
Mm.
and now it's doing a disservice to women because it's then making themselves think, well, what am I doing wrong? Why don't I don't love myself enough, obviously. And how
Mm.
can I love myself more? What do I do? And how many more self-help classes do I have to take or this and that? And so I think that it is much
Hmm.
more compassionate for us to say to ourselves, we are always a work in progress. And I'm loving myself as much as I can every day by doing whatever it is that makes me happy, that brings me joy, those kinds of things. Just focusing on the fact that life is a journey. There is no destination. There's no stop, like fully self loved now. I mean, that's just not a thing. I remember watching Louise Hay, sort of considered the godmother of self-help, in an interview at 79 years of age. She learned tapping from Nick Ortner. And I remember her saying, wow, Nick, this is so great. I'm going to use tapping on all my issues from now on. And I was horrified in that moment because I thought, this woman has been working on herself since the 70s. and and at 79 years of age, she still has issues. Like, how many issues?
Mm.
I'm doomed. I am doomed. But then when I quickly realizes, no, I'm not doomed. I'm just human.
Mm.
I'm going to have issues at 79 years of age as well. We all are, because there's no non-issue place. It doesn't exist. And if we're trying to get there, then we're trying in vain to accomplish something that is not possible. It's a false premise.
It really is. So let's talk about EFT. I mean, when did you learn about it? And you're a full practitioner. You recommend it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love it. I was first trained almost 10 years ago now in 2014. And it was really just sort of a serendipitous thing in a way because I had started my own business. I'd gone out on my own, um, doing training and things. I used to work in the inner city of Chicago with social service agencies. And so I was doing that. And it was the first time I had been self employed. And I kind of forgot about keeping up with my continuing education units that are required by the state of Illinois.
Mm.
Usually was provided by my employer up until that point. So I suddenly realized I needed like 26 hours in about 3 months, which is a
Mm.
lot. So I had moved enough at that point in my career into the direction of mind body techniques and really understanding the power of how some of our trauma is really trapped in our bodies at a very unconscious and inaccessible level, not accessible through language, at least.
Mm.
And so I knew of EFT. It stands for, by the way, Emotional Freedom Technique. And I had heard of it. And I was looking at that and this other one that's very popular called EMDR. But the EFT training for the whole Midwest was in Chicago, and it was 2 full days of training. So I thought, oh, great, I'm going to sign up and do this. And then about a week before the training started, I got the address, and the address, it turns out, was a mile up the street at my house in Glenwood,
Incredible.
Illinois. And I was like, what? Which I live in a suburb of Chicago. So that was very unusual. And then the day I went to class, there was a woman 2 rows in front of me. And during introduction, she said, hi, my name is Cindy, and I'm from Naperville, and I work with breast cancer survivors. Just the week before I was in that class, my very dear friend named Cindy from Naperville had passed of breast cancer. And I believe in signs a lot now. I'm not sure I did as much back then, but I saw that as a sign. I was like, wow, apparently I'm in the right place at the right time. And I did, and I loved it. I learned it. I went home that night. I tapped with my 7-year-old on his fear of the dark. It went away that
Wow.
night. Never came back. He's 17 now. I really got into it. So I went to those 2 days of training. I stayed for the rest of the I just signed up to become a certified practitioner, and away I went. And I've never gone back. So I was a traditional talk therapist for about 20 years, and I've never gone back to it since. This is so much more powerful, so much more effective. I all the time have clients say, wow, like this is something I've been working on for 7 years in regular therapy, and we just cleared up in 4 sessions. And
Mm.
it's really, really dramatic how much you can change your subconscious, which just changes everything.
Is it a form of hypnosis? It's not related, is it?
It is kind of related, actually, because what happens is I teach my clients to tap on their own acupressure points. There's 9 specific points that we use in EFT, and they have done studies where they've had people tap on just random points versus these specific. And it's these specific ones that get the results. So we know that it's these acupressure points. They are meridian endpoints for anyone who knows a little bit about Chinese medicine. I don't profess to know that much. They don't train us that much in the actual Chinese medicine aspect, but just, okay, these are the points, and here's the research. So the research shows when people are hooked up to EEGs and they're getting their brain scan while tapping, they very, very quickly move into an alpha brainwave state, which is the hypnotic state.
Hmm.
So that is the state. Most of us only go in that before you go to sleep. It's that little woozy feeling you have, or like if you meditate, or for my yogis out there, Shavasana, that's an alpha brainwave state when you're relaxed and you're chill. So just tapping on these points moves you into that. Where normally we need to kind of work at that to get there, right? Because our brains are always going, going, going. That's beta. We're usually in our beta or high beta, which is stress. And so we know that simply stimulating these pressure points puts us into an alpha brainwave state. Furthermore, they've done blood and saliva tests pre and post tapping, and they have discovered that it dramatically lowers the production of cortisol, which is our stress hormone. For some of you might know it as the stress hormone that causes belly fat. So this is
Mm.
a real good one that you want to turn off, and just tapping can reduce it an average of 24% in people, but up to 50% in people from just one session of tapping. So it's very,
Wow.
very powerful for that. What they're realizing is if you have a thought, a belief, a memory that has a neural pathway connection to the mid or hind part of your brain, that the amygdala it's called, which is our fight or flight center. If you have a memory that is associated with that, or that is connected to that, and then you tap on it, it collapses that neural pathway and it creates a new neural pathway to your frontal lobe, which is our logic, reason, judgment center of our brain, no emotions there. And so if you do that, you still remember the thing, but you no longer have the emotional reaction to the thing.
Hmm.
So, like, for example, if you're in a car accident, how do you know that when you think about that car accident, it is hooked to the amygdala part of your brain? Well, you can see it when people talk about it, right? They say, "Oh, and I was in a car accident, and then I heard the tires squealing, and the headlights came towards me," right? And you see it in their body language. Because what is happening is our brains do not know the difference between what we're thinking and reality.
Hmm.
Our brains, if we're thinking about a certain thing, our brains will put us right back into the physiological state that we were in at that time. And you can tell because people's eyes bug out, their body tenses up, their hands clench, they get sweaty, all those physiological responses as if they are back in that car accident right then and there. And so when you tap on it, because the tapping is sending that calming signal to the brain, it basically at some point will sort of override this reaction that you're having in the moment of reliving the trauma at a physiological level. And it shuts it off. And then it creates this new neural pathway. And so all the time, my clients will say to me, "Well, I remember, I can still remember what happened, but it feels like someone else's story. It no longer feels like my story because it no longer is eliciting all of that physiological fear response and reaction."
And that was 10 years ago, and you do it on yourself, you do it with your clients, and you help when women come to you in the dating area, how do you help them with it?
So the way I use it with dating is I do have an 8-week online program. And it's an immersive program to really get women to just shift their whole internal story about dating.
Ah.
And so we do a lot of things in the program, but we do weekly tapping circles together with the cohort of women that are going through the program. And we tap on each other's fears and issues around dating. So,
Huh.
real common one, I hate online dating, right? All my clients hate online dating. Everybody hates online dating. And it makes sense. There's a lot of weird, wacky things that go on with online dating. It's so not natural. And so, but if you hate online dating, when you go online, what kind of vibe do you think you are conveying when you're chatting with someone you meet online, right? So, one of the things we do is we will tap on, even though I hate online dating, I accept myself anyway. And so you tap on the side of the hand here, and you say this statement 3 times that pairs the problem with some kind of statement of acceptance. Because our brains don't really like it when we try to force change. Anyone who's tried to diet knows that, right? They
Mm.
don't, we get resistant to change. So we say a statement here 3 times, and we say, even though I hate online dating, I accept myself anyway. And so we say that, 1, 2, 3, and then we move to the next point, which is the eyebrow point. And all of this is on my website at learntodatelikeagoddess.com if anyone wants to watch the video and learn the tutorial. But basically, then we go through the rest of the 8 points, tapping on them using the phrase, "I hate online dating, I hate online dating, I hate online dating," until you get to the top of your head. And then you stop, pause, and take a deep breath.
Hmm.
And then you tune back in and you think, now, do I still hate it quite as much? Maybe you started out hating it at a 8 out of 10, and now it feels more like a 6.
Hmm.
Okay, great. We've made some progress. Now we're going to keep tapping. And so you tap on whatever the negative emotion is. And people do ask me, why do we always start with the negative? Well, because the negative is the truth of how you feel
Hmm.
right now. And that's what's getting in your way. I mean, if you have past heartbreak, that's a great thing to tap on, because if you have past heartbreak and you're protecting your heart, you're certainly not open to opening your heart again in a new relationship. So that's going to cause you dating problems. If you feel scared that you're going to have to settle for less than what you really want, well, then maybe you're going to show up really closed off at things, to events and things like that, because you don't want to settle. So instead of going into something really open, I had a client who she did a lot of like charity events for her work, and they were always like very male dominated. And so she had lots and lots of natural opportunities to meet guys, but she would go in there just sort of energetically closed, just sort of like negative and grumpy and like, just very cynical. She would go in very cynical. And so, of course, guys aren't going to approach a cynical woman who seems closed off. They're going to assume that you're in a relationship or something like that, right? So we really had to work on clearing her
Hmm.
cynicism about men out there, and her insecurities and other things that were really getting in the way of her showing up to these events and just sort of shining and being comfortable in her own skin and happy, and in a way that men would feel she was approachable. I think that's actually another way that Cinderella kind of fucked us all up, to be honest.
Hmm.
Because if you remember in the movie, he ignores all the throng of women throwing themselves at him, but he pays attention to this woman off in the distance looking away. And so I think a lot of women have this false idea that I just need to be like distant and aloof and he'll come to me. And, I mean, you can speak to this better than I, but I have a lot of single male friends who are like, no, no, no. If you're off and aloof, we're going to think that you don't want us to talk to you, and we are not going to talk to you. So in my 8-week program, we talk a lot about this idea of making yourself more approachable. And
Hmm.
it starts from within, from your emotions, and then sort of the energy you're portraying and putting out there. And then when you're out there and you see someone that catches your eye, your initial response for most women, it is to kind of freeze because you're like, ooh, he's cute. And you kind of freeze up. So I train my clients to notice that, observe that when it happens, breathe into it, relax in the moment, look at the man, eye contact, 2 to 3 seconds, smile, and then look away and you're done. And if
Hmm.
he is single and available and interested, he will come over to you after that. But you have to smile. You have to give that, yes, I'm open. I'm interested potentially, because men are just as shy as women a lot of the times. But I think that the double standard there is that, it's like men aren't supposed to be, men are supposed
Hmm.
to be something else, right? So that is that's just another example of how we can really use the EFT tapping to clear all the blocks that are getting in the way of you really kind of being a magnet, being magnetic to what it is you want to bring and draw into your life.
Hmm. Perhaps the word you're looking for there is dumb. A lot of men are dumb, and so they just they need that kind of just verification, however quick it may be.
Right.
And of course, that's your generalization. How do we remove the welcome asshole sign?
Ooh, how do we remove that? You remove it with boundaries, right? And boundaries, the reason most women don't have boundaries is because they're afraid.
Right.
They're afraid of having boundaries. They're afraid that if I set a limit with this guy and I lose him, I might never get another one.
Mm.
So when you have that, when you operate in the dating world from scarcity, fear, and lack, these are the three things I always talk about with my clients. Scarcity, fear, and lack are just super devastating to dating. And it's completely the opposite of dating like a goddess, right? A goddess would never be in scarcity, fear, and lack. A goddess knows her worth, and a goddess feels that there's an abundance of options to her, right? And so that is what I really try to convey so strongly to my clients is if you are at all in this scarcity, fear, and lack mindset, you're going to put up with bad behavior from men.
Mm.
And once you put up with it once, guess what? It's going to keep happening. And so, I mean, if you set limits and say, "No, this is not okay. I'm not enough of a priority. You're not treating me like enough of a priority. So, thank you, but no thank you. I'm going to leave." One of two
Mm.
things is going to happen. He's going to walk away, and then that's your confirmation that he was never going to be able to step up. Or he's going to wake up and say, "Oh, okay. Wait, I really like this girl. I'm going to make her more of a priority," right? And he will come and match your needs. But if you just acquiesce your needs and say, "Oh, well, it's okay. I know his work is really busy and he's got kids. And so, yeah, of course, I'm like low on the totem pole. It's natural." I mean, then you're just lying to yourself. You're making excuses and you're not getting your needs met. And I often say to my clients, just remember the last relationship you left. Are you dating the same person in a different body? Are the patterns the same? Does it
Mm.
feel the same? Because I can tell you right now, as lonely as you might be as a single person, if you get in a relationship where your needs are not met and you don't have a good connection and you feel like you're always acquiescing, to your partner, you will feel lonely in that relationship. And then you're stuck, right? So those are the kind of things once you start to really understand your worth and value, and you start to realize there are 8 billion people in the world, a lot of them are single, a lot of them are men. When you really start to understand, actually there are a plethora of available good high quality men, like men who want to treat you well out there. If you operate from that perspective, then you will start to see and draw in those men to you. And I think, like, a lot of times when I talk about this, people maybe initially take it sounds kind of woo woo, it sounds kind of law
Mm.
of attraction-y, and it is to a certain extent. However, I'm also a little bit of a neuroscience nerd, and I can tell you that there's all sorts of well documented neuroscientific reasons for why this stuff happens. I mean, we have a confirmation bias in our minds where we look for evidence in our environment to support what we already believe. And that is what we see. And so that is what we notice, gravitate, and sort of hook onto.
Hmm.
And everybody does that about everything. You do that about work, diet, exercise, whatever, your kids. People do this about everything in life. It's just a psychological phenomenon that is a universal principle to human beings. Another one is we have this negativity bias where our brains latch onto negative information 10 times more
Hmm.
than positive. That's why your boss gives you a review. He tells you 9 awesome things about yourself, 1 negative, and you spend the rest of the day obsessing about the
Mm.
negative, right? So if you go online and you see one great guy, but 100 guys, you're like, your brain only thinks about the 99 guys that you weren't interested in instead of the one, but you only want one person anyway. Well, not necessarily, I suppose, but like most of us want one person to be our partner. So, that's it your mind gets bogged down with the negative, and it's irrelevant because that one person could be your person, right? But that's not what you think about, and it brings your mood down when you start focusing on the negative. And there's all sorts of Nobel Prize winning research about this, that actually negative neural bundles in our brain are thicker and stronger and take longer to decrease than positive ones. So you're kind of fighting against your own brain to stay positive in the dating game. So that's why my program is this very immersive experience, because you really have to kind of like brainwash yourself for the positive. And then the last piece of our brains that really can do us either a service or a disservice is our reticular activating system.
About right, the no asshole sign. Women don't
Reticular
want a
activating
lot of men. Yeah, if you remember what that is, you could finish there. It was so great. We had a
Yeah.
little interruption.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
And then the last piece of our brain that works against us is this reticular activating system. Well, I should say it works against us, it also works for us. So, what the reticular activating system does is it's responsible for identifying patterns and weeding in or out information that it decides is either important and relevant or extraneous, because we get so much information bombarding our 5 senses all day, every day, that our brains simply can't take it all in.
Mm.
And so things get sort of put on the back burner by your reticular activating system when it feels like it's unimportant, or it gets brought to the forefront of your attention when your RAS thinks it's important. So, easy example is you decide you're going to buy a Tesla, and suddenly you see Teslas everywhere. And
Mm.
you think to yourself, were those always there? Was everybody
Mm.
driving Teslas before, or am I only just now noticing them? Well, the Teslas were always there, but your RAS was not tuning into them. So the way this works in dating is, let's say you had an emotionally unavailable parent growing up. So for you, your childhood impression, the subconscious program that you received was that emotional unavailability, hot and cold behavior is love. That's, you associate that with love. So when you're out and about and you meet someone and they're sort of a little hot and cold to you, you think, "Ooh, I love this person," right? Or
Mm.
you feel an attraction to them, you feel pulled to them, and then when you start dating, you start really trying to get them to be more emotional, to open up the way you might have with your parents. So you're repeating this pattern, this subconscious pattern that does not serve you. And when you do the work and clear up this pattern, clear up all the old hurt around it, I recommend doing it with EFT. There's obviously other techniques, but it's really fast when you do it with EFT tapping. Then suddenly your RAS starts seeing different people,
Hmm.
people that were there all along, but you weren't seeing, people that are maybe very available, very supportive, or very, warm and friendly and things like that. And so I like to share a story that I do tell in the book about a woman who lived in a high-rise apartment building for 8 years. And one day, and she had dated a lot of assholes, a lot of jerks over the years, but she did do a lot of work, a lot of self-help stuff. She did tapping, she did other things. And she gets on the elevator one day and she sees this like very attractive guy. I've seen him. He's objectively attractive. I think most people would agree. And she was like, "Oh, who's he?" And they start talking and he asks her out. And he seems great. He's supportive, super, totally different than any of the guys she's dated to this point.
Uh-oh.
And she, about 3 months into their dating, he says to her, "I've been seeing you on the elevator for 8 years and I've always had a little crush on you, but you never noticed me until that day."
Oh.
So 8 years she was within feet of this guy who is objectively attractive. Like, I can't, like, it's still, the story still shocks me that how did she not notice him? Well, her RAS didn't notice him. So when my clients say to me, "Oh, how am I going to meet someone? I'm never going to meet someone. I'm not around guys." Yes, you are. Yes, you are. But you need to do two things. You need to change. Well, you need to do one thing to have two things happen. You need to change your subconscious programming, your insecurities, your false beliefs about "I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy," all that. You need to clear all of that so that A, you can see better guys, and B, you are magnetic to better
Mm. You know, Allison, it's interesting. I think everything that you said there about, the welcome asshole sign, and, we're talking about it with women, but it seems to me that it also can pertain to men. It didn't seem
guys.
very, yeah, gender specific.
Right, right. No, I mean, I think a lot of these, I have had a lot of like my guy friends say, "When are you going to write the like how to date like a guy?"
Mm,
You know, but no, I think a lot of the principles can apply, especially this one. I mean, personally, in my dating experience, what I have noticed a pattern is that the nicest guys were married to like the meanest women.
yeah,
I started
yeah.
dating some really nice guys post divorce, and their wives had been so mean to them. And I was like, "Oh my God, is this the thing? Like the good guys are dating the horrible women and the good women are dating the horrible guys. Like, what is
Ah,
here?" And I think there is a little bit of that because a lot of us are trying to heal our childhood wounds through our current experience. And so if as a guy you had a parent or early caretaker who you were trying to help heal in any way, or
mm,
trying to help, you know, get out of a depression or get away from an addiction, or get, what, or maybe they were so checked out, you were the parent. If you had an experience like that, when you come across someone in your adult life who subconsciously reminds you of that person. Now, I'm not saying conscious, you don't see it. That's the tricky part, is you don't really see it. But if you enter into a relationship where you are trying to rescue a person in any way, shape, or form, you're reliving some old childhood
mm,
stuff, and it's
mm.
not going to be a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and I think that point can also be said to you spend some time on, what he wants, how to be a goddess in the bedroom.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that chapter is one of my favorites personally because I think it is super helpful, obviously, to women who are dating, but I've had dating men read it and be like, yes, that's exactly it. That's
That's
what we
right.
want.
That's right.
And I've had a lot of married friends read my book
Mm.
that said, oh, that chapter was very helpful. And the concept that I talk about in that chapter is really just applying mindfulness to physical intimacy. And I think it's super important. I
Mm.
actually was being interviewed earlier this morning and he said, "What's your biggest piece of advice for relationships?" And I said, keeping that physical intimacy alive
Mm.
is so important because physical intimacy leads to continued emotional intimacy.
Mm.
And the reason that a lot of women struggle with physical intimacy is because they feel like it is something that they have to do for their partner rather than for themselves. And if you're doing something only for your partner, any of us is going to get burned out at a certain time. And so, the question becomes, how can you as a woman make sex a positive experience for you? And my answer to that is mindfulness. When you're in the bedroom, don't worry about what's going to happen next. Don't
Mm.
worry about exactly what your partner wants. Don't worry about how your body looks with the light on. Like,
Mm.
we women are in our heads all the time. So get out of your head and get into your body. And the quickest way is when your partner is running his hand over your skin, just feel it. Don't
Mm.
think about anything, just feel it. And that's mindfulness, just being in the moment and really taking in things from your senses. And when you start to do that, what happens is you become very receptive, and
Mm.
so then you're just sort of receiving. You're not thinking, oh gosh, now I'm gonna have to massage him back. I mean, or you might be, but ignore that thought or let that thought
Right.
go and come back to just
Mm.
feeling it and just allow. If your partner wants to touch you a lot, just allow him to touch you a lot. Don't be in a hurry to get to the next thing. I think for a lot of women, we've sort of been programmed that sex ends when a man orgasms.
Mm.
And that's a really problematic definition of sex, right? It's not that, no wonder women,
Mm.
often feel less satisfied in that situation. So if you can just relax and receive and let it last as long as it's going to last without being in a hurry or thinking, oh, I wonder if he's waiting for me to do this, that, or the other. No, no, no. Just chill out, be in your body and receive. And most men love that because they're
That's
like,
right.
oh, I'm giving her pleasure. And men want to give, good men. And that's, I say, like 90% of men are good men. They want to give
Certainly.
and they want to provide that pleasure. And that's that masculine energy, right? And
Mm.
women, receptive, feminine energy is supposed to be about receptivity and flow and just going with it and feeling all the feelings. And so when you get in that place and that space and you stop worrying, get out of your head, get into your body, you're
Mm.
having more fun, he's having more fun. It's just everybody's winning. Everybody is winning in that circumstance.
Because the first time could be so awkward. I mean, your bodies aren't used to each other. You're not used to this intimacy with this person that perhaps you haven't known for that long, and
Wow.
there's that connection there, and it could just be awkward. And you're getting in your own way, like you said. I think again, what you said just happens to men too. It's just, is
Yeah.
this what she wants? Is this what should I do? This, get out of your way and get out of your way and let your bodies kind of take over. And
Yeah,
just
exactly.
with the theory of giving before getting, I don't think anything can go wrong.
Yeah, I really do too. It's funny because when I say this, I think, God, people probably think I'm like the most selfish person, but I just think most women aren't selfish enough. I mean,
Right.
there's this, and it's not even like it shouldn't even be called selfish because it's not derogatory. It's just, it's really just about taking in the experience rather than thinking in your head, oh, now I've got to do this and now I've got to do that. But if you really, when you're truly, truly mindful, the definition of mindfulness is that you're so present that you lose yourself. You lose yourself in space
Mm.
and time. And like most people can think about it, if you have kids or you're interacting with a little kid or maybe an animal. Like there's that moment where you're laughing, you're giggling, or you're petting your cat or whatever. And you're just kind of lost in time. You're not thinking about yesterday and you're not thinking about tomorrow, and you're just in it. So apply that feeling of just being in it and just that sort of timeless joy moment, apply it to sex, and it's amazing. And by the way, when I have taught this technique to women, then they start actually orgasming. Women who maybe weren't orgasming, or women who maybe were, but not very often. Because when you're in your body, you're going to start to feel orgasms more, and then you're like, oh wait, I can do this. And then it just kind of learning to orgasm is a thing. You can learn it. And this is one of the quickest paths that I know to getting there, is just being really truly mindful in your partnership. And yeah, it's awkward at first, and it's awkward when you've been in a 20-year relationship and suddenly you're dating again. And the more you're in your head thinking about how awkward it is, the more awkward it feels. So, got to get out of your head, get in your body, and see what happens from there. That's when the magic really happens.
Certainly, and your body wants to orgasm, by the way. And once it clicks, once that connection happens, one of the many reasons why women are better than men is these multiple orgasms. You have the wide ones and the thin ones and the tall ones and the short ones and the pink ones and the brown ones and the blue ones and and men's just have one. And it's so wonderful, and I think it's much better that way, because the man should be enjoying it almost as much as the woman is when she is, because you're part of that, and she's letting you into the experience of her and you doing that.
Yeah.
It can actually be magical, and once it clicks, it's so wonderful, it's so beautiful, that it's worth continuing. But there have been relationships where, unfortunately, where starts to take over, and you start to not. The only time you're not arguing is when you're intimate, and this could be toxic, and you have to watch
Yeah.
out for these things. And
Yeah.
you can't let it be everything, but it still has to be significant. The phrase "men have to have sex, women love to have sex." Your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I've heard that phrase so much. But I understand the concept. And I definitely thought that when I first started dating, I thought that I had a false idea of what men wanted when it came to sex. Let's put it that
Hmm.
way. I had this concept that like all men just want sex. That's all they want. That's the end game. There's a thing in our society that says that. And I find
Yeah.
that that's not true. And I find that there are men with high sex drives and there are men with low sex drives. And there's everything in between. And I think that it's really interesting because women start to develop this idea that they have to be hypersexual to attract a man. And there are some men out there that are not hypersexual, and that's not really of interest to them. And so I think the really important thing is to find a match with you. My good friend who's a psychologist said she would always start her couple sessions by saying, let's just understand what is your definition of a satisfying sex life and what is yours. Because if yours is once a month and hers is once a month, there's no problem. But if yours is every day and hers is every 2 weeks, okay, that's something we gotta work with. So I think the really important thing is just trying to figure out and be really honest with both yourself and your partner as to what is your definition of a satisfying sex life. And hopefully early on, you can kind of figure out if that's going to be a good match or not a good match.
Yeah, and the way we solve that, of course, Allison, is through communication, right? We
Yeah.
have to talk about that, and we have to, because once it happens, once somebody feels unloved, they get to the point where they think, well, the other should not feel loved as well. And then this, separation starts to occur. I follow this one divorce lawyer on one of the videos, and he said this story how he was at a divorce, at a in the court, and there was a break, and he was talking to the woman, and he said, she was very attractive, and they were only married like 4 or 5 years, and she was in her, I think, mid-30s, and he said to her, "How did you know when the marriage was over?" And she said, "Well, I have this one granola that I love to eat every day, and I have it every morning, and it's just one brand, and he would fill it." Whenever it got a little low, he would fill it. It would just always be there. And then one day it was down, there was almost none left. And the next day there was almost none left. So I kind of put it out so we could see it. And he never filled it. And I knew at that point our marriage was over.
Mm.
And, so I said, "Well, why didn't you look for counseling at that point? Why didn't you, do something?" And she goes, "Well, at that point, I just felt, well, if he's going to do this to me, he feels unloved." And then the separation occurs. It's a terrible thing when a tragedy occurs there, right?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And I think resentment is one of the
Mm,
biggest problems, relationship killers, and problems with, when you're starting to date too. If you go into dating or a relationship with resentment, or you let resentment build up between you, you're in trouble.
yeah.
That is definitely a very, very toxic emotion. And by the way, it's an
Right.
emotion we can tap on. It's
Yes.
really, really helpful to tap on because, one thing that people talk about a lot is this idea of gratitude journals and writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day. And that can be really a great practice. My issue with it comes when I feel that if you have resentment about something in life, you can write down 3 things you're grateful for all you want, but you're not feeling grateful. You're feeling the resentment.
Mm,
And when you clear the resentment, let's say you have resentment in your relationship, you clear that resentment, suddenly gratitude is natural. If you're not angry with your partner or resentful towards your partner, you feel grateful for your partner. It's just
mm,
there already. It's like I always say I have this I'm into imagery, right? So I have this mental image of sort of like a closet with like a golden chest in it, and that in there is like your pure heart, and your pure heart is loving and grateful and kind, just like when you were a kid. But in over the years, a lot of shit gets thrown in the closet and covers that up, and so you don't feel those things naturally because you have all these other negative emotions. So if you can just take those out one at a time, take the clutter out of the closet, tap on it, clear it, tap on it, clear it,
hmm,
then suddenly, it's easy to feel loving when you are no longer heartbroken or hurt or scared. You feel loving when you're no longer angry or resentful or bitter. You feel grateful. That's just natural. That's our natural
mm,
state of being, but we lose sight of that with different things that happen in our life. And when we let those toxic emotions build up, then those natural positive feelings are not as easily accessible to us
mm.
anymore.
Yeah, really good point. Another topic you discuss, embracing full femininity, right? To crown yourself your queen to attract your king.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is the chapter that's a little controversial at times.
Okay.
So I always have to walk very carefully with it because I really do believe that there is masculine energy and feminine energy at play in a heterosexual relationship. And it is possible for a man to be more feminine and a woman to be more
Mm,
masculine, not to work. It's possible, but I think it's less common. And I think a lot of times, if a woman is really masculine and her partner is really feminine, sometimes she gets resentful of that, or she gets like annoyed or bitter, or, something like that. So I think for the most part, women, when we can allow ourselves to be in feminine energy, which is flow, which is receiving, which is um, creativity and relaxation and sort of quiet. It's sort of the yin versus the yang for anybody who's familiar with
mm,
that. And the masculine energy is the doing energy. It's the productive energy. It's the go, go, go. So what is problematic in our society is that that masculine energy is more revered and it's more rewarded. Just is. It's a fact,
yeah.
right? And so when we as women are at work or in our parenting roles. Like we have to be in our masculine energy. We have to go, 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 and
Mm.
maintaining the house, whatever. You have to be the doer, be the, person producing and all of that. But when we're in our relationship and we're still wearing that masculine energy hat, we don't allow our man any room to be in his
Mm.
masculine energy. And this is where I think, men will often pull away and isolate and suddenly start golfing all day every day, or go to the bar and watch football and be absent, right? Because the man feels like, well, where is my place? Like she's got it, like so many of us
Mm.
modern women, we're like, we got it. We're juggling all the balls, and don't get in our way. Don't even try to pick up one of these, because that's going to throw us off, and it is about control, and control makes us feel safe. And so when we are still operating in that mode in our relationship, and our man feels kind of boxed out, and he feels like, well, where do I fit in? Then that's when things can really start to break down. And also with dating, I think it's a huge problem, because if you show up on your dates in very masculine energy, and you're almost like interviewing the guy, and like,
Mm.
are you gonna, what do you think about this? And what do you do about that? Like that's not sexy. That's not magnetic. That's not a turn on, but if you can really sort of just be in your feminine energy, which is scary because it
Mm.
requires letting go of control, and you can just
Vulnerable.
really, right? You
Mm.
could just really like receive and just be, again, get out of your head, get in your body. I teach women on dates, if you're really struggling with this, just maybe like finger your wine glass if you're at a restaurant, or your coffee mug or something. Just feel it in your fingers, or feel
Hmm.
your feet in the chair. Just get back in your body and just listen and receive. And of course you ask questions when you want to ask questions, but you're not going at them, right? You're not going at them in this very masculine way. You're just taking it in, and you're just discerning, and you're just deciding, is this my guy or is this not my guy? And and you decide. The feminine energy decides through feeling and intuition. And if
Hmm.
you are so in your head and going at a guy and just really like inquisitive and asking these questions, you're not even in touch with how you're feeling. It's much better for a woman to just stop, take a breath, lean back on a date, and decide, how do I feel in his presence
Hmm.
energetically? Do I feel safe? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel something kind of wonky, like my gut's telling me this guy isn't who he's presenting to be?
Hmm.
You, that's a that's an intuition, and you've got to feel your way through that. And if you don't allow yourself a moment of quiet, you're never going to hear that little call from your gut. So I think that's a really important thing. And the other thing I want to say about this whole masculine feminine energy, because I think sometimes people say, well, what are you saying? Like women should be doormat to their man and just let their man, do whatever. Not saying that at all.
Hmm.
Just to be clear, because honestly, if you're a doormat, that's actually masculine energy. A doormat is someone
Hmm.
who does for their man. Oh, he wants dinner now, and he wants it on the table by this time, and I've got to do that. And he never comes to me. I always have to go to him. Those kind of things. That is doing energy. So feminine energy is just being grounded in yourself, grounded in your knowing of what your worth is and what you deserve, and allowing your man to step up and sort of be your hero. Every guy wants to be his woman's hero, right? Am
Hmm.
I right on this? Like,
In some ways, yeah.
you want to be able to make her happy, right? Like happy wife, happy life is a saying
Sure.
for a reason, right? And I think that when a woman is truly happy and lit up, her man like gets to bask in that light and feel,
Mm.
and it's just, again, it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And when a woman is unhappy, when a man is unhappy, we as women, we're generally like, okay, we're going to give you our space and we're going to do our thing over here with our girlfriends. Like, we're not too affected by that. But when a woman is unhappy, it seems like the men are like, oh, what can I do? I got to, or, oh, I really just need to completely pull away because she won't let me in and she won't let me do anything for her.
Mm.
Right. And so what I'm saying is, as the woman, let him do something for you. Even if he's bringing you the wrong flowers that you've told him you don't like, don't like give him a hard time about that. He brought you flowers. Appreciate it, receive it. Maybe at some other point you can have a conversation about your favorite kind of flowers, but just the more that you are open and appreciative of him being in his masculine energy and doing for you, the more he's going to want to do for you. And so, and then you get to relax. I mean, women don't get to relax very often, and us being
Mm.
in our masculine energy is very draining. And so, if you're in your masculine energy at work and around the house and with kids, like, be in your feminine energy in your relationship and just chill, let him
Mm.
row the boat, like, and just be, and it will be very recuperative for you, because it'll be a time where you can get back your energy.
Alice, when you say this, it makes me smirk because as I get older, I find that I have more questions than I have answers, and just the nature of this conversation, perhaps one of the main reasons why I started the podcast. I want to continually learn, and I ask a lot of questions. And so what happens when I have relationships often is that I ask a lot of questions, because if I don't ask, how am I going to know? So, that kind of feminine energy you describe sometimes applies to me in the communication area. And I've had issues where they're rolling your eyes. You still want to talk about this. You still, and because I just don't completely know, Allison, I have to kind of get some clarity, and I keep asking.
Yeah.
One person called me interrogative, which of course I didn't realize that was the case. I didn't mean to do that, but they're open-ended questions where I still ask. So how can men better appreciate the full feminine nature?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that look, good communication is really important, right? And a lot of people struggle with that. And someone who's not a good communicator is probably not your person when you're a good
Mm,
communicator, right? So we always have to remember that if we're in a relationship and it feels like a round peg in a square hole, it's always hard to walk away. But at
yeah,
some point, you got to walk away, because that's not
right.
getting any better. So there's that. And then I think the other thing is to consider, is the over communication, where is it coming from? Is it truly coming from, I'm trying to understand you better, or is there a part of it that is coming from your own anxiety
Mm,
and being driven by that? And maybe that anxiety is because you're feeling insecure in the relationship, or maybe it's just or anxious about something that has nothing to do with the relationship, but it's just
mm,
sort of, you're sublimating it into that, right? So I think that one of the things that is really difficult in relationship is to check in with yourself constantly and decide, is this my anxiety, or is this an issue between the two of us? Because if it's
hmm,
your anxiety, then you need to clean up your side of the street, right? Before you even approach the other person. So I know in my marriage, for instance, when we had a fight, he needed space, but that made me very anxious. And I was
mm,
not able to sit in allowing him space. So I would go at him. Well, we've got to work this out. We've got to talk about it. You can't walk away. But that had nothing to do with him or us. That had to do
mm.
with my anxiety. And so once I learned, okay, wait a minute, I need to sit, and at some point I learned tapping. So then I was able to
Ah,
tap on my own anxiety, even though it's hard for me to sit in this unknown, tense place. I mean, I just didn't do good with feeling like someone was mad at me, childhood wound, right? That was not that was a pattern, not just with him, but with lots of people in my life, that if somebody was quote unquote mad at me, or I perceived them to be, it made me very anxious. And so then I would do all these things to try to fix it, when really what I needed to do was to fix my own ability to sit with that anxiety and to realize it's not the end of the world if someone is mad at me. And I
hmm,
can survive someone being mad at me. and,
mm.
and eventually getting comfortable with uncomfortable feelings. So that, I think, is something that's really important whenever you're having a relationship struggle of any kind, is to really check in with, what's my part in this, and can I clean that up first? And then a lot of times when you clean up your own thing, your partner will shift, and they'll start to show up differently or respond to you
Mm.
differently because you've done the work from the inside.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun. It's nice when you both kind of figure out that trigger. Recent issue, a friend of mine, road rage. I can't. I mean, they'd get out of their mind, red lights slowing down. And who is this person? Why is it? I don't want to talk about it. Let's get back. And I can't believe how many and then, an hour later, we're having a glass of wine. Did you have how long have you had it? Come to find out, they used to live in an area of the country where they traveled 3 hours, one and a half hour each way. And they're like, I never realized that that's the real reason why they're in another part of the country. That's the reason why I have this now. So, and I just, oh, okay, now I understand. I was thinking, well, maybe I did something during that time that got so then you start trying to figure it out yourself. And it's very tough. Another thing, and I digress here. Sometimes I find myself finishing people's sentences. They'll talk, and if there's a pause or a beat without the last word, I'll fill it in. And I don't know why. And this is recent. My father's an Italian immigrant. He's got a stutter, and he talked to me his whole life. Sometimes he could not finish the sentence because of the stutter, or he didn't know the English word, and I would fill it in.
That's an important clue right there for sure.
So
Yeah.
it was annoying to some people. When somebody brought it to my attention, I had to figure it out, and
Yep.
I eventually did. And so now I know this shortcoming, and I do my best, or I tell people about it. But figuring out triggers like that strengthens relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to bring the EFT piece back in, because I think this is so one of the
Mm,
best things about EFT to me is, how sometimes you can figure out what your trigger is. You get that insight,
yeah,
but you still can't change.
right.
Try tapping on it, you'll be able to change. And you'll be able to change
Ah,
so easily once you tap on these things. So
hmm,
so it's really I think that was one of my struggles when I just did sort of regular talk therapy with people, was that all the time my clients would figure out, oh, I'm doing this because of exactly this, that happened in childhood, but they still couldn't change. But then when you add this tapping piece, because it shifts at such a deep sort of body level, then suddenly you're able to implement that change that it is that you wanted to do, or that you had the insight that you knew you needed to do. So now I get downright excited when I find triggers like that. When either someone points it out to me, or when I recognize, like, ooh, I am reacting very strongly in a situation that doesn't really call for this kind of
hmm,
reaction.
hmm,
That's always, to
hmm.
me, that's like my clue that there's some childhood something or another, or maybe even not. I mean, maybe it's just young adulthood or earlier adulthood, but there's
Sure.
something there that needs to be cleaned up. And I have this amazing tool of EFT. So it's like exciting. Like, oh, okay, I get to get one more piece of junk out of that closet, when I realize that, when I know I can tap on it, and I can remove it. And it's really interesting. I mean, I told you I've been doing this for almost 10 years now. Overall, people ask me, do you tap every day? I don't tap every day, but I tap when I'm stressed out. I tap in the shower or in the car, or times where I'm already ruminating, or if I'm on the phone with a friend and venting, that's a good time to tap. Because every time you're already in the negative emotion and you add tapping, you're clearing it without really trying that hard. And so I can tell you that overall, I am just so much more of a chill person. I used to yell at my kids a lot when they were little. I haven't yelled at my kids in years. I don't respond and react impulsively, or quickly, or hostilely, the way I used to about certain things. It's just, overall, I can see that my nervous system has become more regulated because I have incorporated this piece of this tool, I should say, into my life. It's really, really amazing. So that's why I wrote the book and started the program and all that, because I really wanted to share this tool with everyone. That's why I do these podcasts, because I want
That's right.
everybody to learn about EFT tapping. I think it's an amazing tool to have in your toolbox to help you manage stress. and to help you clear up all those things getting in the way of finding that love of your life that I think is out there. Everybody, there's a lid for every pot, as my friend Gina always says. Your person is out there. You just got to do the work to draw them to you.
Absolutely. So I started my business in the '90s, and I was working way too much, and I was eating poorly and not exercising. I got myself up to 340 pounds, and the doctor said to me, "My daughter was just born. If you don't lose the weight, you're not going to see her graduate." So I spent the next 6 to 7 months. Uh, I lost about 130 pounds. And people always, when I tell people this, I can always tell what's a secret, what's the magic bullet. And of course, there is none. I said the one word is discipline. That's how I lost the weight, just discipline. How does discipline play a role in your life, Allison?
Well, I think that discipline is something that can be very difficult to stick to.
Mm,
And personally, I have found that the tapping really can help me with that because when you feel, let's say, lazy, or when you feel unmotivated, or when you feel like, oh, I'm not going to stick to the plan, the discipline plan that you have for yourself. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm self employed. Like, I need a lot of discipline
mm,
to make my business successful. So now it's like, okay, I just look at what's getting in the way of my discipline very differently now. Let's put it that way. So I say to
mm,
myself, okay, you're feeling, unmotivated today. What is that about? Are you actually just tired and do you need rest? Or are you afraid of failing with this thing that you're working on? Or are you afraid of success?
mm.
I think a fear of success is actually a really significant thing that nobody thinks about, talks about, or is that aware of. But it's like, oh, if my business takes off, what if I'm too busy? What if I'm not available for my kids the way I am now? What if I feel stressed out? Right? So we have these these things that we think we want to achieve, but we might have a subconscious fear that is creating self-sabotage to our own discipline because of
Hmm.
whatever these imagined, monsters in the closet are around achieving this particular thing. I can tell you that happened with me with my book. I talked
Wow.
about writing a book for years. I talked about, I had the idea, I had the title. I don't know, probably like back in 2018. And I remember going to a coffee shop on the regular with a friend of mine, and we talked. She's like, "You got to write that book," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna write the book. I'm gonna write the book." But I had zero discipline around it. And then the pandemic hit in 2020, and I thought, "Oh, great! Like, the world shut down. I'm gonna write my book." Not great that it shut down, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So I was like, I have all the time in the world now. I'm definitely gonna write my book, and I wrote an outline in June of 2020, and it sat, and I did not write the book.
Mm.
And it wasn't until April of 22 that I was having a tapping session with my mentor. And I said to him, like, ugh, I'm 48 and a half, and I'm starting to get nervous about turning 50. And I don't know why. And so we just started tapping on, even though I'm nervous about turning 50 and I don't know why, I accept myself anyway. I'm nervous about turning 50, nervous about turning
Mm.
50. So we go through the tapping process, and something popped into my head. I know enough now to trust the process that when weird things pop into my head, just to go with it, because a lot of times what pops in seems completely irrelevant. But what popped in that day was Paul Ryan, which you might remember was a Republican.
Congressman.
Yeah, and he ran for vice president, right? He was a vice
Yes.
presidential candidate. And so my mentor said, "Why did Paul Ryan just pop in your head?" And I said, "Well, we actually went to college together, and he was a senior when I was a freshman. And I distinctly remember when I heard he was running for vice president, having the thought, oh my God, someone like my peer is running for vice president, and I have done nothing with my life."
Mm.
That was the thought, right? And like, that's not true. Of course, I've done things with my life, but that was there was this sense that I wanted to do something bigger. and be something bigger than what I had been to that point in my life. And I think I was only like 42 back then. So now here, another like 6 years have dragged on, and I still hadn't done that bigger thing. And I would have never realized this and made this connection if it wasn't for the tapping. So once we started tapping and clearing this fear of doing the bigger thing, he said, well, what is the bigger thing? What was it you wanted to do? I said, well, I always wanted to write this book. And so he's like, okay, what comes up for you around writing the book? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I feel like it's this dating book. And what if I embarrass my kids? And what if all
Mm.
the fear of being seen? You write a book, and I knew that in order for it to be good, I'd have to incorporate a lot of personal stories, because that's kind of books I like to read. So I knew I wanted to do it justice, and I wanted to be very, candid and very personal in the book. And I had fear about that. I had fear about putting myself out there, people reading it. And trust me, like everybody I think I know has read my book. And it's a little awkward. They've read my sex chapter. They know a lot about me now, things like that. But the fear of being seen in that way was holding me back. So then we tapped on that fear. And at the end of that session, my mentor said, okay, well, if you're now feeling ready to write your book, I know someone will help you write it in 9 weeks. And so that's what I did. So that
Wow.
session was in April of 2022. I wrote the book, the first manuscript by July 1st, and editing and cover art and all that took till September, and I published the book in 6 months. So once I cleared all the stuff, the discipline was easy. It was
Mm.
easy. But it was the fear that was self-sabotaging me from keeping up with the discipline.
Mm. Boy, that tapping, it really gets your realization. It's really pivoted your life.
Really, absolutely. It has completely changed my life.
What motivates you, Allison Jayne Ewing?
Ah, I think what motivates me is intellectual curiosity.
Hmm.
A lot that really motivates me. It's fun, it's stimulating. I always, like you said, I always want to learn. I'm always
Hmm.
looking to learn. And when I'm not building, exploring, creating, learning, I'm kind of bored.
Hmm.
And I feel unfulfilled. I think that I told my friends this after I wrote the book. I said, it's ironic because I had a relationship right out of my marriage where I really fell hard for someone.
Hmm.
And when that relationship ended, it was very painful, but it was because of that pain that I was driven to do a lot of research on the psychology behind relationships, which I really hadn't been trained that much in, on the masculine, feminine energy stuff, on just, it forced me to date and it forced me to learn how to date better and all of these things. And in the end, writing the book was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my
Hmm.
life. And so without the heartbreak, I wouldn't have experienced this great fulfillment that I now feel as having produced this thing that will live
Yeah.
beyond me, and has a far reach. I mean, I get to do podcasts of people all over the world. Earlier today with someone from South Africa. I mean, it's just amazing.
Hmm.
I love that I've produced something now that people all over the world are downloading and reading and getting, something from. And it makes me feel like, okay, here's my intellectual curiosity now turned into service and turned into helping other people. And that's very fulfilling for me. So I think these are all things that sort of motivate me, is to just want to, A, know more about the world, and B, make it a better place, as sort of trite as that might sound.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, curiosity is, yeah, I can't imagine not learning like yourself. I'm constantly curious about things. So then how do you measure success, Allison?
Well, I measure success, I think, probably in a somewhat different way from most people. I mean, I really do measure it by the level of fulfillment that I feel.
Hmm.
And and I'll even go beyond fulfillment and say a level of alignment I feel.
Hmm.
And you know what I mean by that? It's like when you're in alignment with your purpose, it just feels good. And you know it, right? You just kind of like, you're in a groove, you're in a certain amount of flow. And it's like whether or not it's sort of producing the maybe exact results you were hoping for or expecting can sometimes feel irrelevant if you're really in alignment, because you're feeling like I'm building something here. And, maybe it's not, turning into exactly the way I was imagining it, but I can feel that I'm on track.
Mm.
And sometimes you have a sense that I'm not even sure what the track is anymore. I'm not sure, when I wrote the book, I had no idea that I was going to build a business off of it and create an
Hmm.
online program and do that. Was not the intention. The intention was I felt in alignment to write this book, and I wrote the book. And then I realized, oh, people get something out of the book, but they want more. Okay, I can give them more. I can create
Hmm.
this class. And, and then I'm constantly adding to the class and adding, I learned something and I add it in there. And so it's just this ever evolving, experiment, I guess, with my business currently. And so that I think is fine as long as I feel in alignment. And if I do something or take on something that feels sort of energy draining, that's my signal. That's not in alignment. You got to get back on track.
Hmm.
So I get back on track and I start doing the things again that feel good and that make give me energy. Then I know that that's going to lead to more and more success if I just sort of follow that breadcrumb trail, if you will.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. Allison, such a pleasure to talk to you. I was so excited to talk and had so many questions and just a great conversation. How anybody listening, of course, your book, Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess is on Amazon. How else can we find you? Anybody who's listening?
Well, actually, I do have a special offer for your listeners.
Ah,
They can go to my website,
even better.
learntodatelikeagoddess.com. And anybody who was listening to me on this podcast can download a free copy of the book. So
Fantastic.
yeah, so that's just a little gift right there. And then of course you can reach out to me if you're interested in the online course through the website. And also, I'd love it if people follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Allison Jayne. It's Allison with two L's and Jane with a Y, Goddess Maker. So Allison Jayne Goddess Maker is where they can find me on socials.
Learn to date like a goddess.com. You've got great videos there, a lot of great content. Will put up your Instagram link. You also have a link tree that kind of sends everybody off everywhere. Thank you so much for your time. It was a great pleasure. Maybe if we're ever in the same neighborhood, we can have a cup of coffee and talk a little bit more.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me.
You be well.
All right, you too.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.